Welcome back, everyone. In this video, we're diving into a game-changing Spring Boot technique, configuring nested classes using configuration properties. Imagine this: you're managing complex configurations, user details, application settings, or even multiple service credentials. Wouldn't it be great if you could group related settings in a structured and intuitive way? That's exactly what nested classes can do for you. Alright, imagine the scenario. Our userConfig class isn't just about basic details like username and roles. Let's say it also contains an address class nested inside it, holding properties like street, city, and country. How do we configure such a structure in Spring Boot? Well, that's exactly what we'll discuss in today's video. Let's first create the address class. Use a data to generate getters and setter. At no args constructor for a default constructor. At all args constructor for a constructor with all the fields. And at builder so we can use the builder pattern for object creation. Add the street, city, and country fields. Now add address class object in userConfig class. Now that we've added the address class to the userConfig class, let's take a moment to discuss how these properties are going to map to our configuration file. As we know, we've used the configuration properties annotation with the user prefix on the userConfig class. So, in the configuration file, every property related to this class will start with user. Let's break it down. First, for simple fields like username and age, the property names will directly match their variable names. Like the property names of username is user.username, age is user.age, and similarly for active and roles. But when we get to the address class, it gets a little more interesting. Since address is a nested class inside userConfig, we'll need to represent that nesting in our property names as well. So we'll start with the prefix user, then followed the variable name from userConfig, which is address, and finally, for each field inside the address class, we'll add another dot followed by the field name. This is how Spring Boot understands nested properties. For example, for street in address, the property will be user.address.street. For city, it will be user.address.city. And for country, it will be user.address.country. See how each nested field inside address is represented with the user.address prefix, followed by the specific field name. This is how Spring Boot maps the values from our configuration file directly into our userConfig class, including all nested fields. Alright, if you have any doubts about how the property names are structured for nested classes, feel free to drop your questions in the comments below, and I'll be happy to clarify. Open the application.yml file. Under the user prefix, add the address fields. Within address included street, city, and country. Now, Spring Boot will automatically load these values into our userConfig class. Update our REST API to return the address field along with the rest of the user details. Start the application. Switch to Postman and hit the API. Look at that. As you can see on the screen, the address in the API response matches exactly what we configured in the application.yml file. Everything is working perfectly. Imagine we want to store some user preferences in a map inside our userconfig class, like for language settings. So, for example, if we want to add a preference for language, the property name in our configuration would be user.preferences.language. What happens here is that the preferences map will hold the key language, and Spring Boot will automatically bind the value of user.preferences.language from the configuration file to this map. Alright, now it's your turn. Try adding the map for user preferences, just like we discussed, and use a property like user.preferences.language in your configuration file. If you face any issues or have any questions, don't hesitate to comment below, and I'll help you out. Go ahead and give it a try. Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more videos. In the next video, we'll discuss something interesting. If you want to configure the same class for two different properties, do you need to create two separate classes, or can we achieve this with just one class? Stay tuned.